Hey, okay, I think we are live here. Um, this is my first time ever going live on YouTube. So I would like to talk to you for just a moment. I know that there may or may not be anybody who jumps on this live video. As you all know, on this channel, we interview authors, and every author has a different book. Every author has a different story. Every author has their own approach to how they go about writing, what their writing style is, how they edited their books. All of these things make each one of our authors unique. But today, I want to share with you a very special book. And I know that this is probably showing up a little bit backwards for you guys because I have my screen turned around. I'm actually recording using my phone today, which is another thing I don't ever do. But I'm at home, not in my office, and I just felt very compelled to share this with you before we do the interview with the author in a few days. This book is called Why Me, Lord? And it was written by an author by the name of Wally Long. And I want to make sure that when Wally is on next week, each and every one of you listens to his story and you find out about this book. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the preface to Wally's book. And I want you to listen very carefully to this, because I think when the time comes for you to get to hear from Wally, you're already going to know a little bit more about his story. And I think that this story is so very impactful. I'm going to just give you a thumbnail sketch of what this book is about and a little bit about Wally. Wally was a lay minister who had started a church, and as that was going on in his life, several tragedies happened back to back. And out of those tragedies, Wally wrote a sermon to help others through tragedies that they might be going through. That sermon has been used to help many people, and he decided to go ahead and write that in this book. But I'm going to read this preface to you, and then next week, next Tuesday or Wednesday, I would like for you to tune in and hear Wally's interview on a book. Why me, Lord? On October 26, 2006, I received a phone call from my brother, Cal. He told me that our youngest sister, Tessie, had shot herself and was dead. What? I could hardly believe my ears. We rushed to Nebraska to be with her husband and young daughter. The entire family was there. It was a very emotional time for all of us. Because of her self-inflicted wounds, her body had to be cremated, and we had a memorial service. Her husband asked me to preach the service. It was one of the hardest things I had done at that point in my life. In the months following, I felt at fault. Tessie and I had spoken on the phone just a few days prior to her suicide. As a trained professional, I had suicide awareness training. I should have picked up on the clues during our phone call. I could have intervened and saved her life. Mom also felt responsible. She had attempted suicide by gun in 1972. She believed her example led Tessie to do what she did. The fact is, there was nothing anyone could have done. She found herself in some legal trouble over some things she had done in her past. Instead of telling us, she chose to go out on her own terms, and she did. While we were still grieving my sister's death in July 2007, I received a phone call at about 12:30 p.m. from a worker in the ER at one of the local hospitals. One of my sons, who was then 18 years old, had been in an accident on his motorcycle on the way to our house. She told us we needed to get to the hospital right away. We arrived at the hospital to find our dear son in the ER screaming in pain. He had lost his right leg in the accident, lost a lot of blood, and nearly died. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital and had many surgeries. On the day we were taking him home, I received yet another phone call. This one was from my other sister in Colorado. Mom had been taken to the hospital and was dying. Mom's health had not been good for many years because of injuries she sustained in a suicide attempt when I was only 12 years old. Her injuries had finally gotten the best of her, and her body simply stopped functioning. She died a few weeks later on September 5th, 2007. I never had the chance to say goodbye. Our family, in a state of emotional, physical, and spiritual turmoil. Our family was in a state of emotional, physical, and spiritual turmoil. I lost a sister, almost lost my son, and lost my mother in less than 11 months. I had been preaching as a layperson at a church we had helped to start, but I had nothing left to give, emotionally or spiritually. We left that church and started attending one closer to home so we could just rebuild and recuperate after months of intense trauma. It took us a long while, but eventually our life took on a sense of normalcy. Then, on March 1st, 2011, our world completely turned upside down. I was nearing the end of my shift at the federal prison in Springfield, Missouri, where I worked. At about 9:20 p.m., I received a phone call from my brother's oldest son. He was sobbing uncontrollably. Through his sobbing, he told me that someone had broken into his parents' house and killed them both. The attack injured their two youngest children, a 5-year-old girl and a 9-year-old boy, and they were being life-flighted to the Children's Hospital in Denver. I rushed to the airport and took a plane to Colorado, arriving early the next morning. The rest of my family followed by car, arriving late the next evening. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotion and grief. For a while, it was touch and go for the boy. His injuries were severe. He had been shot twice and stabbed 6 times. The bottom completely fell out of our upside-down world. 2 days later, when the investigators told us they had arrested my brother's own 12-year-old son for the terrible deed. No way. How could this be? But the case was rock solid. He had killed his own parents and almost killed his little brother and sister. We spent almost 6 weeks in Denver while the 2 young children recovered sufficiently to be taken back to our home in Missouri. By necessity, I retired from my prison career at the end of April 2011. Over the course of the next several months, I made many trips back and forth to Colorado for both the adoption hearings. The state of Colorado was facilitating the adoption of the 2 children into our family, and the court hearings for the murder case. The attorneys in the case ended up agreeing to a plea deal whereby the now 13-year-old boy would plead guilty to first-degree murder in juvenile court. In September 2011, they sentenced him to a maximum of 7 years in prison. 2 months later, in November 2011, the adoption was finalized, and my brother's 2 youngest children were now our 7th and 8th children. In the years following, there was much counseling for both the 2 children and our youngest natural son, who was the same age as the nephew who killed his parents. My wife and I had been holding the family together and finally went into counseling to help us deal with the trauma and the changes forced upon us. I found myself repeatedly asking, "Why me, Lord? Why have you allowed all of this tragedy to take place in my family?" I began to search the scriptures for answers, and God gave me a sermon. It was a sermon that I needed. It was a sermon born of deep grief and suffering. I have shared this sermon with many audiences in churches and other Christian events. That sermon became the idea for this book. I pray that the lessons I learned through the tragedies and my study of the Bible will be a blessing to you as you read this book. Throughout this book, I will use various words to describe the tragedies we faced in our lives. Trials, tribulations, troubles, hardships, hard times, afflictions, storms, and sufferings. I will use these terms somewhat interchangeably to describe the difficulties we all face. This book is not a Bible study, although I will, throughout the book, define some biblical words in more detail to better explain how the Word and the related passages help us answer the question, why me, Lord? It is not a book of theology, although my theological bent will be seen throughout the book. Please do not let differences in theology and doctrine prevent you from reading this book for the answers you need. This book is also not a how-to book. I'm not trying to give you a step-by-step plan for enduring and overcoming your trials and tribulations. There is no such plan. However, as I share with you the various aspects of why me, I will endeavor to give you biblical principles to help you through your dark time. This book is a book of encouragement. I pray that the answers and biblical principles found in this book will encourage you while you are going through difficult times in your life. As I have found answers, I have written to help you find answers. I believe the answers found in the Bible and detailed in this book will help you get through the trials in your life. I pray it will help those walking alongside friends and family who are going through hard times. As we all know, it is hard to find the right words to say to someone who is suffering. Trite but true phrases such as, "The Lord is walking with you," "All things work together for good," and other such phrases are usually not comforting in the middle of tragic circumstances. So what do you say? Just be with them. Hand them this book and encourage them to read it when they are able. Pray with them. Walk with them as they seek answers during their times of great hardship. I hope that you will join me next week when we interview the author of this great book, Wally Long, as he shares with you his insights into why me, Lord. And thank you for joining me on this live video on a book, and I hope that you are as excited to get to dive into Wally's book as I am. Thank you for watching, and God bless.